Hey everyone, it's Nico from the blog documentingsimpleliving.com, where I talk about simplifying food, self-care, and consumption in the modern world. Today I wanted to share 5 really cozy and simple sourdough discard recipes that are perfect for the cooler months of fall. Where we are, it is definitely fall. It's been raining a lot. Now it's sunny, but it's definitely crisp, so fall is in the air. The leaves are changing, and it's my favorite time of year, so I find it very exciting. And it also makes me want to start baking more and makes me want to always have really cozy snacks on hand to enjoy with an espresso or a tea in the afternoon. I won't talk through the exact measurements of every recipe, but everything you need is in the description below. I hope you give these recipes a try, and if you do, please tag me on Instagram. I'm documenting simple living, and I'd love to see what you make. So the first recipe I wanted to share is apple sourdough discard muffins. These are so simple to make. They're ready in under 30 minutes. This recipe doesn't even have sugar in it. It just has maple syrup for sweetness and apples, of course. So they're healthy, low in sugar, and they have the gut healthy probiotics that are in sourdough discard. So you just combine sourdough discard with some maple syrup or honey, milk, coconut oil, butter, and eggs. Mix that all together. Then use flour, baking soda, baking powder. Mix everything together, add your apples to the mixture, and then bake in muffin tins. And they're ready to pull out of the oven in about 20 minutes. So really fast and really delicious to make. I like to eat them with butter. You can also eat them with peanut butter. They make a great snack and a great breakfast. One thing to know about using sourdough discard is that, well, first of all, sourdough discard is the flour and water that you discard when you're building up a mature starter. So usually when you build up a sourdough starter, you, over the course of 5 or 7 days, add flour and water to a glass jar, mix it, and then the next day you discard half of it. And then you refeed the half in the glass jar, and the next day you discard half of it again. And the reason you do this is because you're cultivating wild yeast in the sourdough in the glass jar, and to cultivate that effectively, you need to keep feeding it. If you avoided discarding, you would be needing to feed your sourdough starter an enormous amount of flour and water. So it's a way of keeping the sourdough starter that you're cultivating maintainable. But it is at the same time, I find, a bit wasteful because you're getting rid of that flour every day for a week. And so sourdough discard is what you're getting rid of, but you can actually use the discard in recipes, which is what I'm going to talk about today. What to know about using sourdough discard is that if you're using sourdough because you have a gluten intolerance, it's best to wait until your sourdough starter is mature because it will have the full fermentation power of a mature starter at that point. So after about 7 days or so, your starter should be mature. Whereas discard is not a fully mature starter. In the first few days, it's basically just flour and water. And so there are far fewer fermentation benefits that you get by using discard in baked goods that you make at home. So if you don't have a gluten intolerance, then you can use your discard in recipes. It will add a bit of a tangy flavor, and it also avoids the waste that comes from discarding. But if you do have a gluten intolerance, I would recommend just waiting until your starter is mature and then making sourdough recipes. Overall, I like using discard in recipes because it avoids waste. The next recipe I want to mention is sourdough discard banana bread. So again, this is very simple to make. It's ready in under an hour. What you need to have on hand is, of course, overripe bananas, sourdough starter or discard, flour, eggs, maple syrup or honey, butter. I like to use coconut sugar in lieu of brown sugar or processed white sugar. I just like the flavor more. You combine all that together, mash up the bananas, add them into the mix, and bake it in a loaf tin. I like to slice a banana in half and put that on top of the banana bread before I put it into the oven, just to have it be a bit fancy. And I like to sprinkle a bit of cinnamon on top of the loaf as well. And it's delicious. It's moist. It has a bit of the tangy flavor from the sourdough discard, and it tastes just like a wonderful banana bread. And I like it because, again, you're using the discard that you would have otherwise thrown away. If it's been on your counter for a few days and maybe it's gotten a bit hard, you can cut off a slice and put it in your oven and toast it for 5 minutes or so, and then put butter on top with peanut butter, and it tastes great. It has a bit of a crunchy exterior to it, and then the middle is still soft, and it's really delicious like that. I like to have it as an afternoon snack with coffee. The next recipe is sourdough apple cake. So I've made this a few times. I like to make it in my cast iron skillet because I can layer the apples in the bottom and then put some of the cake batter in the middle, and then another layer of apples and another layer of cake batter. So it's sort of a layer cake. It's a great time of year to make apple baked goods because there are so many apples right now. This recipe also doesn't have sugar in it, just maple syrup or honey. I like to use maple syrup because I just find the sweetness or the flavor of maple syrup is a bit deeper than maple syrup, especially when you combine maple syrup with apples. I like that flavor combination more than honey. The next recipe I wanted to mention is sourdough discard granola. Now, I never until recently thought to use sourdough discard in granola, and the reason that you do use it in granola, or you can use it in granola, is because it helps to clump pieces of oats and nuts or whatever you put in your granola together. So usually when I make granola in a large Dutch oven, melt coconut oil and maple syrup or honey, and then add a bunch of oats and mix that all together, and then just throw in whatever nuts or seeds I have. And then you just put it in the oven and you let it get a little bit brown, and then you can store it on your counter and eat it with cereal or yogurt. But when you add sourdough discard, the granola has a bit more of a shape to it, and it also has a bit of the flavor of sourdough, which I really like. I think it adds especially for fall and winter, it adds a nice flavor that's a bit deeper, and I don't know, it's a good flavor combination for fall, I find. And you can use your mature starter as well. So I think the recipe calls for half a cup of discard or starter. Pour that in after you've melted the coconut oil and honey or maple syrup and oats together. Mix that discard in and add nuts and seeds and make sure everything is nicely coated. And then I like to put my granola into my cast iron skillets and then into the oven so they can get toasty that way. It's something I started trying just recently, to use cast iron skillets instead of baking trays with parchment paper, just because I thought it would be one less step. So I don't have to put the parchment paper on the baking trays. I can just put them in my cast iron skillet into the oven. So I'm always trying to simplify, no matter how small the simplification is. But it's really great. Like I said, eat it with milk and yogurt. You can even use it as a topping to muffins that you make or something like that. So it's really delicious. I find that granola that's healthy, so without processed sugar, where you get like nuts and high seeds and things that are high protein and nutritious for your body, it tends to be so expensive in the store, and it's just ridiculously easy to make at home. So there's really no reason to not give it a try. It's so simple. So the last recipe I'm going to mention is sourdough discard pumpkin bread. So perfect for the fall. This recipe calls for pumpkin puree. So you can use pumpkins, which are available right now. I just like to roast them in the oven and then remove the seeds and use my immersion blender to puree the pumpkin and use that as pumpkin puree. But you can also do the same with butternut squash. So it's remarkable how similar they taste in baked applications. You can roast a butternut squash or boil it, and then just use an immersion blender or a fork to really mash it up and get it into a pureed state, and then use that to make this sourdough discard pumpkin bread. Sometimes I make a special pumpkin seed crumble thing that I put on top of the pumpkin bread. Recipes for both of those things down in the description below, but this pumpkin bread is so moist, and I think that sourdough discard adds a really nice flavor to just what would otherwise be normal pumpkin bread. So I hope that these recipes sound nice to you and that you give them a try. I've put together 5 more really cozy fall sourdough discard recipes that are available in an ebook down in the description below as well. The good thing about sourdough discard recipes is that they're ready really quickly. So if you have like an hour where you have a little bit of time to yourself, you can whip up one of these recipes super fast and sit down and enjoy it with a hot coffee. So this is what you will see when you buy it, and you can just download the ebook and access it on your browser, or you can download it and save it to your desktop and then print it off for referring to later whenever you're in the kitchen and looking for something yummy to make. The ebook costs $3. if you're not signed up to my newsletter, I would recommend signing up because I plan to put out ebooks probably one every few months. And as part of being able to make this business sustainable, to support myself, I'm going to be charging just a very small amount for those ebooks. But if you sign up to my newsletter, I do plan to send discount codes to my subscribers, just as a way of saying thank you for following along and try to build this community of people who are interested in simplifying their life in one way or another. So if that's of interest to you, you can sign up to the newsletter down below, and you can also find this ebook down below. So I hope you enjoyed trying these recipes, and please do let me know if you give them a try down in the comments or tag me in photos on Instagram. Until next time, thank you so much for stopping by. I put out 2 new videos every week about simplifying food, self-care, and consumption in the modern world, and I will speak to you in the next Documenting Simple Living video.